So blackout packages, they are strictly for looks. And the fire service, most of the fire service got rid of gold leaf years ago because it was a fairly costly part of an apparatus, strictly for looks. So many departments just went to like reflective striping and different packages like that, which is far less money than actual gold leaf. So then what happened is we've switched now to the blackout package. And if you look at your normal pickup truck, a blackout like a black grill in a pickup truck costs less than a chrome grill. Fire service, it's the opposite. Everything has been stainless steel or aluminum and polished. So if you want a blackout package, it actually costs more, right? Because they take a stainless steel grill, they prepare it, prep it, they paint it, and they have to warranty that paint too, right?
You're listening to another episode of Rig Recon Live. I'm Bruce Quick alongside Jason Witmier. And before we get started, we'll do a couple quick housekeeping items. If you haven't followed us on social media, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. That's at Rig Recon. Visit our website, rigrecon.com, for all the latest apparatus information, including product comparisons, product videos, and comparison charts, and so much more. And then finally, you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, you should be. Make sure you hit those post notification buttons so you know when every episode comes out. So, Jason, this has the potential to probably be the greatest episode of Rig Recon ever recorded because we have two Bruces in the room here. So, double the power here, double the star power. Bruce Griffin is joining us today, and I won't do justice in any introductions. So, Bruce, thanks for coming on and give us a short little background about yourself.
Hey, nice to meet you, folks. And about me, I retired as a captain out of Ottawa Fire up in Canada. So we were a city about 1 million people. And I was involved with Apparatus for years, first of all, as a consultant for a couple of local engineering companies. And then more so lately, after with Ottawa Fire, when I was designing a bunch of their rigs with the team that was involved there. So that's my background. And then the last thing I did was I started the page on Facebook called Fire Apparatus Tactics. And I had about 50,000 followers before we got hacked and never got it back, unfortunately. But it gave me some time to do some other things. So that's the quick background.
Was there anything really interesting posted up there when it was hacked?
Oh, they posted some awful things up there, and I could not get rid of it. It was disturbing, some of the stuff they put up.
It's amazing how some of this works these days.
Yeah, you really be careful.
We're really happy to have you here, Bruce. It's kind of funny, and I mean Bruce Griffin, the other Bruce work. He's here all the time, so whether or not we're happy to have him, it's immaterial. But we kind of give a title or a subject matter for each of our podcasts, and this one was kind of simple. It's why. So it's asking that question why. And you're making a huge investment in a fire apparatus. These days, $1 million plus for several of these apparatus. And asking the question why on just about everything you do is really important. The unfortunate answer is a lot of times when you say why, because that's how we did it before, or that's how we've always done it. So before we even dive into subjects, Bruce, just in your experience, if there's any little things you've seen, or if there's anything you want to just say about the topic of ask the question and have an answer instead of just because.
Right. Well, it's a tough subject, right? Because the fire apparatus market has changed after what's happened over the last, I'll say 5 years, where before it really was the departments were in charge and they led the industry. And I feel it's sort of switched now that a lot of the industry is leading the fire department. Fire departments are looking for apparatus quickly sometimes. And so there's a lot of stock apparatus out there. The biggest, I won't say problem, is that what's good for one municipality may not be great for another. And it's trying to come up with why you should do something and how do you get that data, or how do you come to the right conclusion. And there's no magic formula, right?
Yeah. So years ago, I had the privilege or curse, not sure how we want to put it, of working with the committee for Ottawa, and Bruce was part of that committee. And in all honesty, I learned a lot building those trucks, because I think you guys did an amazing job of asking why, but there were also so many studies that they did. There are several things that make a Canadian fire truck a little different than a US built fire truck. And of course, even across Canada, there's differences between a truck on the eastern side of the country versus the western side. But just between some of the things that made Ottawa unique, Bruce, if you want to talk about a little bit about that, because I think it's interesting for the fire service.
Right. Well, the first thing is that we fight fires in igloos, which is completely different than a normal house fire, right? But no, I would compare like in my area, I'd compare our climate to probably similar to Chicago or something like that. So we have our bad winters just like everyone, and then we have nice hot summers just like everyone else, right? So yeah, when I look at those trucks that we did with you, we bought 24 apparatus and great trucks, but of course it was a learning curve from our end. And when we did it, we actually thought we were pretty smart, right? And only through experience do you realize, okay, maybe I'm a little dumb in some of the things we did, right? But one of the things that was most interesting about those Ottawa trucks is we looked at ergonomics, we looked at visual, like we covered the things in the Reflexite. And, when we talk about if you want to call it the way apparatus look now, we went to this study, and what it showed us was that if you're outlining or putting reflective material on your apparatus, you should outline the wheel wells, because people don't recognize a stripe, but they recognize wheel wells. So if you're parked at a scene and your wheel wells are accented and it shows the outline of your truck, now they recognize it's a vehicle and that vehicle might move. So there was things about that. The other one was a simple one was when we looked at ergonomics. And one of the fellas, Kevin Pohl, who was one of the guys in our committee, he looked at that almost exclusively. And an example was that one of the things that you guys did for us was you put flip down steps in front of each seat in the cab. And what happens is instead of having your foot on the floor, you have one foot up on that step. It actually is so much better for your back and creature comfort. And I think I remember you, Jason, you came in and said, come on, guys, like that's a little much. And you sat in the rig and said, wow, that's really comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. So it was little things. And in cases like that, those aren't big ticket items. It was a relatively easy thing to fix or to make. But I look back now at some of the things we did, and we caused an awful lot of engineering for the manufacturer. There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
but you're going to pay for that.
Right? Absolutely. You are going to pay for it.
Right. And I guess part of the thing now is that when I look at what manufacturers are doing, if you can stay within their norm of, let's say, the top 50 options that they usually build with, you're going to be pretty economical. But as soon as you try to customize a rig that it's going outside the norm, it's going to cost them engineering time. It's going to cost them manufacturing time. And both of those things cost money. And it costs money to the manufacturer. And now, especially when manufacturers are trying to get their delivery times down, if they can shave 10 days off each apparatus, that means the delivery times come down. So now I think that's the change that I see, is that what's happening is if people are trying to, and they're actually telling salespeople, try to get them to stay within the norm, and you won't have to wait as long, and it won't cost.
One of the survey things that you had done that I'm curious about how it worked out for you in the end. It was a study on night blindness and having that bright white light in a compartment that lights up that compartment really well. But now when I turn around to the darkness, I lose vision for a few seconds. So you had done red interior compartment lighting, which I found unique.
Right.
That feel like that worked out?
It did and it didn't, right? So as an example, if it's bright white, right, you can see the stuff inside it, but again, it affects your night vision. And when I look at somebody going to grab their irons out of a compartment, and they go from this bright white compartment grabbing their irons, and they look at the fire at night, and now they're trying to readjust, their eyes are trying to readjust, and their night vision goes down, right? So if you go with red compartment lighting, or there's blue, there's different things now, or even just keeping the compartment lighting to different levels, maybe a dimmable level, then that's actually a great idea, right? It just is it's a simple fix. It's not a costly fix, but it's a way that, and you never would have thought of it, right?
Right. Awesome.
And I think talking on those builds, and maybe you alluded to it a little bit, are there any things looking back at it that maybe you would have done differently? And if so, can you elaborate on some of that stuff?
Well, I'll give the one big one. So Blitz fires were pretty new at the time, and our department was just getting Blitz fires. So we wanted our Blitz fire pre-connected in a compartment, and the manufacturer did a great job, but it was an awful lot of customization. And in hindsight now, because I've seen this on different rigs after, if we had just used the standard compartment that's on the back of a rig sometimes, and gone with a pan door with a slot in it that the hose could be pre-connected and gone in, it probably would have saved us at the time, I'm going to guess, 10 grand a truck. Right. So part of the question when you ask why is, let's just say that the standard stock apparatus does 90% of, let's say, a suburban town's calls pretty well, right? Because 90% of your calls are a one-line fire, or a car accident with a bit of cribbing and a combi tool. Alarms ringing, you're getting your high-rise pack and your tools. But a stock apparatus does that pretty well, and that's 90% of the time. Now, you'd have to look at your own responses to see whether that's valid or not, but if you just use that as 90%. So how much do you want to spend for that last 10%? And I can argue both sides of the fence here, because if you talk about that last 10%, well, that last 10% probably accounts for 95% of your dollar loss fires. That last 10% counts for 90% of your fatalities. That last 10% counts for 90% of your firefighter injuries. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's important to spend that money on that last 10%.
Right. That makes sense.
So there's no right or wrong answer with it. It's just, how much do you want to spend? And if you take a stock apparatus and add, let's say, the top 50 options that are usually on a truck, do you now get to 97, 98%? And I would suggest that most departments, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the one thing I'll point out is that that Blitz term you use, that must be a French Canadian term, because we refer to them as Ram XD lines.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Just kidding. It is an industry term, but we like to poke fun at it. So you mentioned,
can edit that out, I'm sure.
That's right.
No,
Yeah.
it's a yeah. We'll just have AI keep saying it.
That's right.
We talked about some of the stuff that you do now with consulting, and I see a lot of your postings on LinkedIn. And if anyone's on LinkedIn and you don't follow Bruce Griffin, please do. They're great postings. They're lighthearted, they're serious, but there's always something a little bit funny in there too, because Bruce is a very fun person to just hang around with and chat to.
Right.
I wanted to talk about a couple of the postings. One that jumped out at me specifically because you pointed out a mistake. It's a mistake I've made in my career. A lot of times when we're designing these fire trucks, if you're the engineer at the apparatus manufacturer, you're looking at things and say you got a tunnel going down through a tank and you got a discharge coming out into that tunnel. So you design that tunnel to go in a certain spot. But then a different person is bolting the steps on at the end. And NFPA, I believe the distance is 18 inches between each step. And it's so that first step up from the tailboard, they go 18 and they go the next 18. And then the pipe comes through and they put the end on the pipe with a droop elbow. And lo and behold, you can't fold the step up and down because the droop elbow is right up against it.
Right.
It was a great example. There's been a couple other postings that, if you want to elaborate on them, I love the droop elbow one, some of the stuff with access to your suction hoses. If I'm
Right.
hardly ever going to use them, maybe it's not a big deal. If I'm going to use them a lot, or your ladders. You comment on, hey, you get them ladders way up on top of the truck out of the way on an arm because they stick further out into the street. If you want to elaborate on some of that.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about how that works. So often what will happen is a fire chief or the fire committee, the apparatus committee, they'll see a truck and they'll go, oh, I really like this one thing on this truck from this city. So let's put that on ours. And then, so you add in your tender or request for proposal, 15 or 20 things that you want. But the way one manufacturer does it compared to the next manufacturer can be completely different. If one manufacturer is using a form body and the next one is using an extruded body, that changes where that discharge is going to come out the back. So the idea of, well, if I get manufacturer A, this option is going to work great. If I get manufacturer B and specify this option, it's not going to be so great. And I think that's part of the issue is we see a truck and we say, I want that on my truck. I don't care what. And there was one, I'll talk about one, and let's just talk FDNY. FDNY for years has had their handrails recessed because they were probably ripping them off a lot, and they have old stations, right? So this department said, let's do recessed handrails. So they did, but because they went to they didn't extend the cab or lengthen the cab, there was no place to put the handrail behind the crew cab door or to recess it. So, and then they went with I'll say they didn't go with West Coast mirrors, which fold in as you hit them. So you have a mirror that can't move, and then a recessed handrail, which actually costs a lot of money.
Yes.
Right. And then another handrail further back that sticks out. So they spent the extra money on that recessed handrail, and it was a complete waste of money because you're going to either rip off the mirror or rip off the other handrail.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So I think what works well with one manufacturer doesn't work well with another. I'll give an example of one of our past. We wanted a medical compartment on the crew cab. And so it came off the officer side above the front wheel. We didn't realize that with the manufacturer that we chose, that there's venting out above the wheel. So that raised that compartment from the ground quite a bit. We had suggested, we had put in the thing, we didn't want any interior access, and we wound up having to cut access in because our shorter members couldn't reach that compartment. So just because it worked well on, and I'm not even going to use whichever manufacturer because it doesn't, right? But just because one manufacturer, that medical compartment is great, the next one, it's poor. Right.
And think about it. They met your spec. They didn't meet what you wanted, but they met your spec.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, go ahead.
Yeah. So it was interesting. I remember one department that I looked at, and they had specified they wanted a certain height of cross lay. And I saw a spec for a department or for one of the manufacturers, and the crosslay was higher than their specification.
Mhm.
And well, and they had a compartment below the crosslay. And I said, well, why would you do that? And he goes, well, I gave them more space in the compartment. And I go, the compartment size didn't matter. It was
Yeah.
about the tacos, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So again, it was an engineer trying to help out, but in the end, it didn't, right? Tried to give them more space. He didn't understand. So when I help out departments with doing specifications, I'll say, you want to give a specification or your request, but you also want to give the why so they understand it.
Absolutely.
And I think, Bruce, on the topic of the LinkedIn postings, one of the ones that also sticks out to us is your posting where you talked about how large lights on the tip of an aerial can affect operations, and obviously one of the companies we represent is FRC, which manufactures a large variety of scene light options for all sorts of applications. So maybe elaborate on that a little bit and talk about the pros and cons of that.
Yeah, so it was interesting. We had our trucks were specified by some different people before, and they thought, hey, we'll put great big floodlights on the tip of our ladder. And on the surface, it's great. You're going to have lots of lighting. It's perfect. But
Right.
what happens is on a straight stick, when you bring that in from the side, that floodlight actually acts as a you can't get close to the building. So now when you're jumping from the ladder onto the building, what happens is now there's a gap, and if you fall, you can fall several stories down. And one thing that we found with the ones that we had is that your coat would actually get caught on the floodlight the way they did it, and it would hold you up as you were trying to climb off a ladder or even trying to get a victim onto the tip. Again, and like I have to admit, right before I went downtown, I had never rescued anybody off an aerial ladder, right? And only once I did it did I realize, oh wow, does this ever make a huge encumbrance for us to be able to do our job? So the having the lighting at the tip is great, but now there's some great lighting options that are small heads. And
Right.
what we suggest, if you want lighting, elevated lighting, put the larger tips or the larger head lighting off the base section, but off the tip, try to keep it small. And clean tip is actually pretty. I think a lot of people are ordering it now,
Yeah.
right?
So we talk as we wrap along your LinkedIn stuff here. We continue to talk about it. It's not just fire apparatus stuff. You also get into a lot of situational awareness things, and we all get caught up in codes at times. Oh, the code says I have to do it this way, so that's what I'm going to do, and then we let logic totally escape it. We just had this debate with the NFPA code
Right.
and seatbelt alarms. Okay, I really want my guys belted up and the alarm's going off and off. But now, if my driver can't hear important information coming over the radio because in the background he's hearing beep, 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 the simple answer is, well, tell the guy to put his belt on. Well, what if the switch failed and he can't put his belt on, or his belt's on, but it doesn't think his belt's on and it's still beeping away? So,
Yeah.
some of the situational awareness things, I know you guys did a few things at Ottawa with the backup alarm.
Yep.
I know that you did some things with controlling certain lights to kill them. I know there were some issues with some scene lights flashing in normal response mode that would cause you some issues in a blinding snowstorm. If you want to go and talk about some of that.
Yeah, so I'll talk really. We saw an engine for Syracuse and actually loved it. They had their their brow lights alternating with their merge lights, and so we did it. But what we found is that it was so blinding that we had specified very, very bright, high intensity lights, and it blinded drivers, right? So we actually had to program it out after, right? But it was one of those things of maybe more lighting is better. Well, sometimes it isn't, right? And if you're in fog situations, of course, being able to turn off your white lights. When we talk about if you want to talk about the backup alarms, one of the things we asked for was the backup alarm disabled. And lots of manufacturers had a problem with it because your backup alarm is supposed to be on. And we try to be respectful of our neighbors. So if we're backing into the station And we, like in our department, you have to have 2 people out backing you up. You have a backup camera, you have mirrors, and we thought it was a little rude to be having a backup alarm going off at 2 in the morning, especially if you live right beside a fire station. So we asked for it, and it caused quite a stir, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, I think it's actually. I wanted to bring up a story about liability for a second, right? So I was a captain on a truck. We're responding to a call, and this call is out in the rural area, and there is not a house or traffic or anything for miles. We can see all the way down the road. It's a forested area, and my driver has the siren going full blast. So I leaned over and I just shut it off, and they said, no, I want the siren on. I need it for liability. I thought, okay, so I turned it back on. So we got back to the station, and afterwards I pulled him aside and I said, hey, just a quick question. Why do you feel the siren has to be on from the time you leave the station to the time you get on scene? And they said, well, I need it for liability. It protects me legally. And so I asked them, I said, okay, but when we were responding, we went in the opposite lane of traffic. And there's no law, at least here, that allows us to go in the opposite lane of traffic. And that's pretty well in North America. The only thing we're allowed to do is speed and come to go through a stop sign or a stoplight once you determine it's safe and you come to a complete stop.
Right.
So in the one case, the firefighter was arguing, well, I have to have the siren on for liability. But in the other case, they said, well, I'm going to go completely off the lane of traffic. That if they got in an accident, they would be completely held liable. Right? So I don't have a problem if a department says, hey, we're going to do everything safe, right? Well, I do. I'm more of a little bit of a cowboy, but you can't pick and choose. You can't say, oh, I want to use my siren 24/7 and then for liability, but then disregard other laws that would leave you liable.
Right.
And I think that's the point that sometimes we, with our situational awareness or our situational ethics, we pick and choose what law or what SOP we want to follow. And I was guilty of it too. I'm not saying this with judgment or from a holier than thou standpoint, right? It's just simply that I always looked at the siren. The siren is not a look at me device. The siren is a warning device. And if there's nobody to warn, why are we blowing the siren like crazy? And so on the apparatus that we worked on, Chase, we put on a mechanical siren, air horns, and electronic. And when we thought they would pick and choose, most of the drivers were using all of them. And it sounded like a full task force coming down the road. On the last round of apparatus, we went strictly to a Q siren, and that was it. And with the air horns, of course, right?
Sure.
And with the Q, you can control your volume. So at 2 a.m, if you want to protect yourself from liability, you can tap your Q, go through the intersection, you've protected yourself. But if it's 3 p.m. or 4 p.m, and you're at a busy intersection and you're going for a kid trapped in a house fire, then that Q's going full blast, right? So it's situational, and I think it's accurate for a firefighter to control the volume, right? But in our case up here, it says our law actually says all warning devices have to be sounded. So guys are using it saying, no, you have to have the Q going, you have to have the electronic going. So we switched to just the Q.
So now they're all going.
Yeah,
They're on there.
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting point.
And I think as we finish up the LinkedIn postings, you're getting like a full social media review here from Jason and I, but it's all interesting stuff. And I want to bring up the topic when you posted about Canadian Bill, and I think we often push the term "Made in America" and even sometimes romanticize about that phrase and what it means, and several people say it but don't really mean it. I think it'd be interesting for our audience that in Canada there's actually some teeth behind it where you can get fined if you lie about something like that. So maybe just elaborate on that process and what that looks like.
Right. Well, so without getting into politics, what's happened right now
Yep.
is that just like the U.S., Canada made equipment is, we're proud of it, right? Like we want our industry to grow. We want our economy to grow as well. But the reality of the fire truck industry is that all of the chassis are made in the States, right?
Right.
All the pumps are made in the States. All of the valves are made in the States. All of the good lighting, I will say, is made in the States, right? You can get cheap knockoff stuff, but I wouldn't recommend it, right? So to meet the criteria of made in Canada, our law actually says the truck has to be 51% Canadian content.
Mm.
And you can't get a truck that's 51% Canadian content. And so it's like just like our local manufacturers are proud of what they do, and they put out some great trucks, but they put out some great trucks made with US parts and made usually on a US chassis with a US pump and US lighting. And so our countries are, well, at least our country is dependent on US, right? If it's very important for us to have that working relationship. And most of our major cities are using, US brands of apparatus or some combination of.
Don't worry, we're very dependent on you too, especially if you look at the amount of aluminum that comes out of Canada.
Yeah, for sure.
Very, very dependent. So it's interesting. We didn't plan it this way, but as we approach the end here, we just started to talk about a little bit about cost in a way. And I'm not going to say the dirty word tariff, but we all know they're out there. But
Right.
you did a good series on a very controversial topic. Why do fire trucks cost so much these days? And right away, some people want to point at the OEM saying they're greedy and corporations have bought them up. So now they just want to make more. Some people say, well, the people that make the components like us just keep raising prices. In reality, there's a whole lot that factors into it. And your series was terrific because it touched on all of the little different parts and did point the finger at one person or one thing. There's two things. I'd encourage everyone to go read the whole series. There's two that I wanted to touch on. One to rib you a little bit because maybe I'll disagree with you, but also one that I agree 100% with. The first one, let's start with the agreement. Blackout packages.
Yeah. So blackout packages, they are strictly for looks. And most of the fire service got rid of gold leaf years ago because it was a fairly costly part of an apparatus, strictly for looks. So many departments just went to like reflective striping and different packages like that, which is far less money than actual gold leaf. So then what happened is we've switched now to the blackout package. And if you look at your normal pickup truck, a blackout like a black grill on a pickup truck costs less than a chrome grill. Fire service, it's the opposite. Everything has been stainless steel or aluminum and polished. So if you want a blackout package, it actually costs more, right? Because they take a stainless steel grill, they prepare it, prep it, they paint it, and they have to warranty that paint too, right? If they go full on where they're doing even the queue and everything, it can be, well, up in Canada, the price for some apparatus is 50 grand for the blackout package. So when you look at that, you can't say, oh, fire apparatus are so super costly and the manufacturers are the problem if we're specifying stuff that's strictly for looks, right? And especially for spending 20 grand all the way up to 50 grand, depending on what type of apparatus you're buying. And I think it's just important to understand. Now, the other thing that was interesting is not a lot of chiefs really understand the cost, right? Like we just say, okay, well, we want a blackout package. And you might think, oh, it only costs 10 grand. Well, on $1 million truck, $10,000, no big deal, right? But if you do 10 options that cost $10,000, there's $100,000, right?
Yep.
But the other side of the coin is if your firefighters are proud of their apparatus and they feel like they're going to take care of them. So
Sure.
that's the other side of the coin. Is if you make it, I won't say cool enough, but if you make it quality enough, if you make it make them proud of it, they're going to look after it, and you're going to get more years use out of that truck. But even if you talk about, let's just talk about a smaller apparatus. Let's say the Blackout package is $20,000. Well, if it lasts 20 years, it's $1,000 a year, right? And when you look at it like that, we do lots of stuff for morale and everything. So if you spend $1,000 a year on your Blackout package, is that a big deal? Well, it's not a big deal if you have a little bit extra money, but if you are tight for money, the Blackout package costs money, and I hate to say it, it's not anything it's not required.
Right.
Right.
Right. And your thoughts on having pride in ownership, they absolutely matter. But I think your point is just weigh the benefits. And hey, if this makes sense and it's really going to get us something, great. But let's not just do it just to be cool. Once again, coming back to where we started, we're asking the question of why. So,
Right.
so the one I was going to call you out on, and it's not really calling you out, but it was a cab tank level gauge, or the tank level gauge on the back of the truck. Now, your point was very valid. If someone has a tank level gauge on the pump panel, and then they put 4 big lights on the side of the cab with certain manufacturers, now you're talking probably 4 holes per light. So you're talking 16 holes drilled into that cab. You're talking the cost of the lights. You're costing more wiring and a driver. The shameless plug that I wanted to give just to correct you is, if you use the right tank level gauge, like the FRC Max Vision, you're talking 2 holes in the cab, 1 wire, no driver, because it's driven directly from our gauge. So I just wanted to let you know there is an affordable option for cab tank level gauges.
And you see, here's the thing. If you have like a crew of 5 on a pumper, your pump operator is probably not leaving his position very often.
Right.
But if you're a 3-person crew, guess what? The pump operator is the one that's catching the hydrant, and he wants not only a tank level gauge on the side, he wants one on the back of the rig so he can keep an eye on it and radio to the captain and say, Cap, you're at down to a quarter. You need to back out. I don't have my hydrant yet. And I think what works in one municipality, or what's important in one municipality, is not necessarily important in another. If I could bring one up really quick as an example, New York City was probably one of the first, if not the first, but they really pushed the low height hose beds, right?
Yep.
And when you look at it, New York has a fair chunk of manpower or of staffing on their trucks, right? So a lot of people followed suit. They said, okay, I want a low hose bed, and it can't be more than however many inches off the ground. So manufacturers were looking after that, but they would have a very short hose bed. So what happens is you have a lot of folds in your hose, and unless you grab all the loops, you actually have more hose trailing behind you than and it depends on the size of your hose, but not only the height of it, but the length of it. And I remember a New York City firefighter told me years ago they tried longer hose beds, but with their walk-ups, with their tenements, one guy would take the first couple of lengths of hose, and he'd go out 10 feet. The next firefighter would go grab the next one would grab it. So they have 4 or 5 guys, and they could jump up the stairs of a tenement and be up the 5th floor without getting hooked on banisters. If you have a long hose bed, guess what? Now you're getting hooked on banisters. And so theirs wasn't just because it was the coolest thing. It was because they looked at it for attack, right? So if you say, I want a low hose bed, but now you fill the hose bed right up to the top, well, now you have a high hose bed, right?
High hose bed with a low bottom.
A low bottom, that's all. So it's interesting. And I didn't even realize that until we started changing our hose bed, right? Like on the apparatus that you built for us, we had all of our supply hose on one side, and that was new for us. Most of the time it was all the way across the top. Well, when we were laying down the street, it actually laid in a straight line instead of in a a curvy wandering line, and it made it easier for the second and third truck to get in. And we didn't plan it, but it just worked out that way.
Nice.
And so, as we sort of close out here, Bruce, we always end with like a top 3 to close out the show, and I think this will be a good one. So, you talked about it earlier in the episode. Jason talked about it too. The fire truck builder is going to build what's in the spec, but it might not be what you want or what you truly need. So, in
Right.
your opinion, the top 3 things someone should consider when specifying a vehicle to make sure that they get what they actually want slash need.
Right. And this list is going to change dependent, right?
Yep.
But my
Yep.
top one is get the size of the truck that's good for your area. If you're in suburbia, 100-inch wide cab might be great. But if you're downtown, there's lots of smaller options that I think are important. And we had some 100-inch wide cabs, and we ripped the mirrors off them all the time until the drivers got used to them, right? Um, so size of rig, and just because the neighboring city with good water has 500-gallon tanks, if you don't have that, 1,000-gallon tank or more might be important. So I would say try to get some data, like how much problems do you have with getting water? How much water do you need to carry? And that will determine the size of your truck overall, right? Um, the next one is a harder one to pinpoint, but it's about the parts availability and the maintenance. If the company has a bad reputation on getting parts or getting maintenance done or getting repairs, I would say do not go to the lowest bid, because yeah, it's great you have a low cost truck that you saved some money on off your capital budget. But if you're spending double the money on your in your operating budget on repairs, or if the truck's out of service for months and months and months waiting for parts, then you're not further ahead. You're actually behind, right?
Right.
And the last one for me, it's all about if it's and it depends on the type of truck. If it's a pumper, it's all about the attack. I don't care about repacking hose, although some firefighters will say, "Oh, I don't like this truck. It's hard to repack." Don't care if our attack hose comes off quickly and efficiently, right? We have to look at we can't be you got to look at the overall truck. And I'll give an example. Those trucks that Jason built for us, there it was quite a change from what we had. And if you went around the kitchen table, you would hear lots of complaints about them. But at the 6-month mark, we did a survey of all the firefighters, and they actually scored above average. And what we found, out of the 35 things we checked on that we asked them to rate, there were only 4 things that were scored below average. And when you put that in that perspective, that meant that over 30 things that we checked was above average, but what people were concentrating on was the negative part. So
Yeah, and I think yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so in that case, and I'll give the example. In our first round, we had specified a certain brand of seat, and there wasn't a lot of room for the officer. The officer was typically a bigger person, and the officers hated that seat and hated the truck because of it. But nobody else hated it, right? But they were the ones sitting around the table pounding their fist. And the rookie and the driver and everyone else isn't going to say to the captain, "No, I think you're wrong, Cap," right? But we fixed it on the next round because we adjusted. Again, I didn't realize when you order seats, they come in all different shapes and sizes, and you can get them so that there's more leg room or less leg room, higher, lower. And and that's the thing that you don't necessarily get when you just get a stock truck.
Right. Yeah, I think great points there. And as we wrap up today, Jason, before I pass it off for final comments, I think a lot of great nuggets, a lot of great information. And, you know, we've done quite a few of these now and talked to so many different people and different perspectives. And it's awesome to get everyone's view on everything. But I think common themes sort of lay out when we're talking about specing the vehicle. It's one, you got to figure out what you need and what you want and prioritize those things. And then two, you got to do your homework and become almost a subject matter expert. And hopefully you're using resources like Rig Recon or referencing your LinkedIn page of people's experiences, because that's huge. And then third, I think a common thing that we hear quite a lot, Jason, is you can't necessarily do what you've always done in the past, and you also can't do what your neighbor's doing per se. You can't go bigger or better or the exact same. You really got to do your homework, and it'll pay off in the end. So, Jason, I'll open it up to you for final comments and wrap up here.
Final comments. First of all, Bruce, you've been a friend for several years now. I enjoyed working with you when we designed those trucks. I learned a lot, and I really am happy you're able to join us today. You've got some great insight on things. One of the things that I think you really said that stuck with me is the attack is the most important thing. Why are we here? We're here to put out fires and save lives. If it's a hassle repacking the hose, as long as we're not injuring someone, if it's a little more difficult, who cares if it came off in a better way? Now, if there's a way to do it both in a safe and faster way, that's one thing. But if it comes off really well and is a little harder to put back on, coming off is the important thing. So I thought that was a great point.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. And Jason, I just did want to ask, I'm not sure how well you were paying attention, but how many coffee cups did I drink from?
I think I saw 2. Oh, definitely at least 3 now.
Oh, there we go. There we go. See, the greatest episode ever. It's done. It's been
Nice.
sealed and written.
Very nice.
But no, Bruce, again, thank you for your time. We really do appreciate it, and another fantastic episode. So, again, you've listened to an episode of Rig Recon Live. If you haven't already, follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram. That's at Rig Recon. Visit our website, rigrecon.com, for all the latest apparatus information. And obviously, we're the hometown team. We want you to pick our products. But again, Rig Recon is strictly educational. It's to get the ideas flowing. It's to give you the do's and the don'ts and other people's perspective and what works for you. You can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. And until then, expect the best.